Hello, and welcome back to the Love Your Dogs podcast. This podcast is heart led, real life, experience based, and not dry science. So today, I'm going to lead you guys through my journey on how I figured out fresh food feeding for dogs. I'm going to take you from point A, which is feeding my last two golden retrievers a solely kibble diet, all Royal Canin, Real Canine. I still don't know how to say it, and I'm still not embarrassed. Royal Canin Golden Retriever Adult Formula. That's what those two ate day in and day out. That's what I thought was best. It was about 100 and plus, $100 and some change per bag. I thought it was the best of the best, even though I knew in the back of my mind I should probably at least be cooking for them. That's where I started. So that was my point A. I'm taking you from point A to where I am now with Pine, who is my first 100% naturally reared dog. He is an almost 15-month-old golden retriever, and right now we are preparing raw meals for him ourselves at home. 100%. I keep some pre-made raw on hand for emergencies or when I just don't have the time to stop everything and prepare meals for the week. So that's where I am now. And I get questions about how to feed our dogs a better diet more than anything else. And it's clear to me because I always put myself back in my own shoes where I was a few years ago when I knew nothing about this, because I think a lot of the education that's shared online now, while everyone means well, I believe that they're sharing education from a point in their journey that they're currently on instead of really thinking about where where most of their audience is currently standing, which is usually wanting to do the best for their dogs but feeling so overwhelmed and so intimidated and not having a clue how to take the first step. And I think it often paralyzes a lot of people where they're like, it is so far over my head. I don't know where to begin. I don't want to do it wrong. How do I make sure it's complete and balanced? It gets so overwhelming that they're just like, I'm going to keep feeding this kibble, or I'm just going to try and find a kibble that's a little better. And I'll be completely honest with you, there is not a single kibble that I recommend and think is good. I think that they're all bad. Just the fact alone that they do not have moisture, that alone makes it terrible for our dogs. Our dogs are designed to derive moisture and hydration from their food. So if you are feeding kibble, I guess let me just start there. So kibble, if those of you who are feeding kibble, whether it's for financial reasons, time reasons, convenience, you truly believe it's what your dog handles best, kibble can be very easily elevated to a better place just by adding hydration to the food. I've talked about this a million times on my Instagram page. So, those of you who have been following me, sorry you have to hear this again, but don't ever forget it. So, add hydration to your kibble. If you're feeding kibble, you've got to add at a minimum filtered water to every bowl. Add it over the kibble, let the kibble soak in it for about 15-20 minutes, and then feed it to your dog. But even better, you can step it up occasionally and add really good bone broth. I love Green Juju's bone broths, Crude Carnivore, Small Batch, all great dog safe bone broths that you can pour over the food for extra nutrients for your dog, some real food. Raw goat's milk. Again, Green Juju has great products. Solutions Pet Products has even better raw goat's milk products. Love that. You can pour that over the food. You could even do herbal infusions, chamomile, nettles, dandelion leaf, dandelion root. Do a tea, let it cool, and you can pour a little bit of that tea, in a safe amount for your dog and their size over the food and add some minerals, add some vitamins, nutrients, add life to the bowl, add hydration to the bowl. So do that. And then I also, for anyone that's feeding kibble, add some digestive enzymes to the kibble as well, to that moisture in kibble concoction. I keep hitting this thing. I'm so sorry. I'm a very handsy talker. So add the hydration and then also add digestive enzymes. Some of my favorites, or two of my favorites, only two I recommend. Healthy Gut by Adored Beast. I'll link these in the show notes. And then Dr. Good Pet's digestive enzymes are also great as well. I recommend getting one, finishing that, and then rotating to the other and just rotating back and forth. So those are ways to elevate your kibble. I didn't know this. I was just feeding good old dry plain kibble all the way through until Anne's acupuncture appointment that I talked about in the last episode. So my dog's at kibble. I was very strict about kibble. The vet said don't feed table scraps, so I didn't do that. I thought feeding table scraps was going to make dogs be beggars and make them fat or make them sick. So I was like, no people food for my dogs. And I thought I was such a good dog mom for doing that. And now I realize that that could have done wonders for them if I fed them table scraps on a regular basis. So that's besides the point. So I was feeding Kibble, met with that acupuncture vet who convinced me or kind of prescribed me to replace half of Anne's kibble with gently cooked food. So that's where I started. I started both dogs, Skip and Anne. They were ages 11 and 7 at the time. I just took half of their kibble and replaced it with a blend of cooked cod fillets and cooked ground turkey breast some days. And then other days was just replacing half of their kibble with some cooked eggs. And this is so important for most of you to understand because this journey does not have to be perfect. I know you see these beautiful, curated, raw bowls, and I show these sometimes too when my bowls look pretty and cool. And you're just like, it just seems so far away from where you're standing to get to that. And it is. For me, it took a couple of years. So know that you can start with some gently cooked, simple ingredients like that just to kind of dive in and see how your dog tolerates it. See how you tolerate it. Get a feel for what it's like to cook for your dogs, prepare meals for your dogs. And you'll see, I can do this. I can totally handle this. It's a little overwhelming at first. It feels like a lot. But after a couple of weeks, just like with anything, after a couple of weeks, it becomes a habit and you start to get used to it. So the cooked food is just a really good way to get yourself started and get yourself confident. And I didn't plan for that, but now that I've done it, I'm like, this is the way to go. So, a lot of people I work with one on one who want to feed fresh, a lot of them feel much more comfortable going with a gently cooked option first. And I'm completely okay with that. And honestly, I do believe a raw diet is optimal for several reasons, but I think fresh is best. No matter what you do, feeding your dog something that's real and living and has hydration is going to be better than what's in those bags of dry kibble. So you can start there. And remember that I was just replacing half of the kibble. So it does not have to be all or nothing. If you're replacing some of that kibble, you're adding some hydration, some real food, it's making a huge difference. If you remember what I said about Anne, her collar size went down, her inflammations went down drastically within the first couple of weeks. She was full of life again and running and jumping and playing, and her coat dramatically improved. The light in her eyes came back. Her skin improved. That's something I didn't talk about in the last episode. She had hyperpigmentation. She had a really dark belly that I never knew was even a bad thing. I thought that was her skin color, but that same vet pointed that out to me, and within a few weeks, that hyperpigmentation went away and her belly went back to a perfectly light, beautiful pink. So you don't have to be perfect. You can start with that half and half or just 25% of their kibble, replacing it with some cooked food, seeing the results. And I promise you, you're just going to want more. And if you can't do more, it's okay to kind of stick to that program for a little while and, continue to get confident, continue to get your finances in order and a plan, but just give your dog some fresh food now and then. So that's how it started for me. I started with the half kibble and half gently cooked as prescribed by that wonderful vet who just opened my eyes up to everything and quite honestly just changed my whole world. So I did that and then I wanted more, and I wanted to figure out how I could feed 100% fresh diet. And that's what led me to the book. Do I have it right here handy? Yes, I do have it right here. It is Dr. Becker's Real Food for Healthy Dogs and Cats. Now, I'm not recommending this, but this is the book I turned to because when I learned that I wanted to feed my dogs a raw diet because of all the reasons I've read about raw being the best, minimally processed, digestive enzymes, most species appropriate for our dogs, I'm like, this is what I want to feed my two dogs, a raw diet. But remember, I looked into We Feed Raw and Farmer's Dog is cooked. I wouldn't feed either one of those foods at the moment, but I looked into those. They were too expensive. So that's when I said, okay, we'll try to do this ourselves. I got this book. I got a meat grinder. I tortured my husband and I trying to make 30 days worth of food in one day a month. We did it for a few months and it was just not for us. I'm like, I would rather my time spent trying and stress spent trying to make the food myself. It just wasn't worth it. Like, it was worth it to me to spend that money monthly. So the next best step. So I started by thinking I could make a raw diet at home myself. And you absolutely can. There are better ways, and I'll get to that. But the way I started completely turned me off, said, no way, I can't do it. But where I recommend for everyone to start, you can start with that partially cooked option, adding a little bit of cooked food to the kibble. And then you can, once that makes you comfortable and gives you some confidence, you can go into pre-made, raw, or gently cooked foods because there are a lot of great brands out there now who are doing good things. There's some that are cutting corners that I would avoid, but there are some really good ones. And I'll get into some of my favorites, but I'll link it in the show notes, a guide that I call Dog Food Brand Recommendations for Healthier Dogs because of that reason, because fresh food feeding is becoming popular, which I'm proud of. It's a step in the right direction, but there's companies that aren't there's either they don't know or they're knowingly, disregarding any integrity and cutting corners to try and make money. Most likely they're just trying to make money. So there are companies out there that I would not recommend feeding your dogs, but there are some great ones who are doing things right. And in that guide, I walk through my favorites and why I like them, what they're doing right. And I also walk through some options for dipping your toes in on making food yourself at home and some resources that can help train you how to do that and give you confidence to do that. So I do have that guide, but I'm going to walk you through a couple that I like. So obviously We Feed Raw for a little bit because I was working closely with them. They gave me food for free. As far as I knew, it was a really good option. And my dogs seemingly did fine on it. But the problem was, shortly after starting to feed them We Feed Raw, I got the cancer diagnosis with Anne, which had nothing to do with the food. It just had to do with her lifetime of vaccines and kibble, flea, tick, and heartworm meds, pesticides, agricultural chemicals. We lived on a farm. So it had to do with a lifetime of that. She got diagnosed with cancer. And on that journey, I ended up finding a great holistic vet, Dr. Judy Jasek of Animal Healing Arts. I love her. If you're looking for a great holistic vet that offers virtual appointments, she's incredible. I'll put a link to her page in the show notes. But more specifically, if your dog has been given a cancer diagnosis, she has a lot of experience in treating dogs with cancer holistically with a lot of success, keeping them around a lot longer than your conventional vets tell you. So for Anne, we denied or we turned down. We didn't want to do any conventional treatments. We didn't want to do any chemo, radiation, surgery. And we were told that she would only have 60 days to live because we didn't want to do any of those treatments. And she ended up living about 9 months solely on holistic and natural support under the guidance of the wonderful Dr. Judy Jasek. So I ended up booking an appointment with her a couple weeks after Anne was diagnosed with cancer because I needed some help. I had heard her on a podcast and I loved her perspective on things. And I'm like, this is who I need to work with. She's really going to help. And she did. But she has her consultation set up to where you work with a nutritionist that she has on staff first. You have a quick phone call with her first to go over all the nutrition stuff, which I think is brilliant so that Dr. Judy Jasek can focus on the more important matters. So she has someone else discuss nutrition with you. So I had that call with that canine nutritionist, and she asked me what I was feeding Anne, and I was proudly like, "We feed raw." And she says, "Okay, well, we're not going to feed that." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, it's meat, organs, bones. It's a raw diet. It's USDA approved meats and whatever. And she says, we're not going to feed that. It has synthetic vitamins and minerals, and they use HPP, which is high pressure pasteurization or high pressure processing. I think it can be used both ways. So that kind of offended me. I was like, oh, well, I'm getting it for free. This is really all I can afford right now. And I think it's great. I think that's a little extreme. So I agreed and, nodded along. And she sent me a list of foods that they approve of and said that it's really important to get her off of any foods that use HPP or have synthetic vitamins and minerals. So I kind of took it with a grain of salt and I continued to feed them We Feed Raw for a couple more months. And then fast forward into June of that year. So I think that was in April or May that I talked to them. And Skip, my other golden, was diagnosed with cancer while we were on the road. He was diagnosed with a very aggressive cancer. And that's when I was like, you know what? I don't care that I'm getting it for free. I don't care that I'm saving $600 a month by getting this food for free. I can't take any risks. Both of my dogs have cancer. And if synthetic vitamins and minerals and HPP are going to do harm to my dogs or burden their systems in any way further, I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to. So I reached out to We Feed Raw, who was, again, always been good to me. They were very understanding of my decision to stop feeding it. I was very transparent about why. And that's when I went on a mission to start going through some of the pre made brands from that list and fully vetting them myself to make sure I was going to feed them the best of the best while my poor dogs are battling cancer. So, to give a quick overview on the synthetic vitamins and minerals topic. So, to meet AFCO minimum standard or to sell pre-made formulas, these brands have to meet AFCO minimum standards to prove that their foods are complete and balanced. And unfortunately, I think that is really hurting the pet food industry as a whole because these standards are garbage and it's creating motivation for a lot of these companies to cut corners in order to meet those standards. And companies that they have a lot of great ingredients, but at the end of the ingredients, you'll see this big chunk, a few lines worth of vitamins and minerals that sound great on the surface. But when you see them in this big chunk like that, separate from the whole foods that are listed before, you know that they're using a synthetic vitamin mineral pack. I need some water. And, you know, the thing about synthetic vitamins and minerals is they're not going to be as bioavailable as whole foods. And so your dog's not going to be getting what they need, although the food says complete and balanced because they're not absorbing the nutrients the same way that they would if they were in a whole food. Excuse me. So there's that piece. And then oftentimes our dogs' bodies will recognize the synthetic vitamins and minerals as foreign. So it's just more burden on our dog system to process those materials that they're kind of treating as toxic or foreign. So they're just not good. In a world where our dogs are already so overburdened by toxins, having those synthetic isolates in the food are just not ideal. We don't want to do that. And while some of you might think, oh, but this vitamin's good and that vitamin's good. And here's the thing about it. Here's how I get my head around it. So, one company may be balancing their pre made food with all whole food ingredients, no synthetic vitamins and minerals. And that food is either the same price, maybe even sometimes cheaper, or just a little bit more expensive than the food that is using synthetic vitamins and minerals. So if you're already going to be spending a premium to feed your dog fresher food, why not feed them the food that is not going to do them harm? It just seems like a no brainer to me. And that's where I arrived at my decision to finally just say, you know what, I'm going to spend the money and buy pre made food that is whole foods only. Because really, the price difference is negligible. It's just a matter of consumer education. It's just a matter of you knowing what to look for. So that is why I put together a guide because I know that can be very confusing. And I'm sorry if I didn't explain that well. But I put together a guide that points you towards those who are doing it right, who aren't using HPP, or if they are, I'm transparent about it because there are some great companies. Green Juju is a wonderful company that I really like that has some wonderful sourcing and some wonderful limited ingredient formulas that for our sensitive dogs or dogs with known intolerances and allergies, they do really well on. They're a really great innovative company. I trust them. The owner, the founder has a great origin story. But the HPP thing throws me off. So, high pressure pasteurization is just like an extra processing step that some companies will take to make the food safe, to kill any pathogens. It's supposed to keep the food and the nutrients intact while eliminating the risks of any bacteria, pathogenic bacteria. And so it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like a good thing, but then there's people on the other side of the coin that argue that it denatures the food, that the foods, loses nutrient quality and isn't as good and bioavailable for our dogs anymore after that. So I err on the side of avoiding HPP foods, but I still don't know exactly what I truly believe. But just because I'm not sure, I just go with foods that don't use it. And that being said, I still recommend a company like Green Juju. They have wonderful formulas. They do a good job. I do trust them because they know more than I do. They've done more research on it. And while some might argue that they use HPP to sell more food, to make it more marketable to those who are fearful of salmonella and E. coli in the raw food, although some may argue they're doing it for the money and to sell more, I say regardless of that, if they're getting more fresh food in dogs' bowls, that's wonderful. And I really love what they're doing. So I hate to even bring that up because I don't want to put them in a bad light. But that's just something to think about and do your own research on. So that covers synthetic vitamins and minerals and HPP processing, and bringing it back to that guide I have where it lists out my brands that I trust and whether or not they use. There's no brands on that list with synthetic vitamins and minerals. And then there might be one or two that use HPP. So that's that discussion. And that kind of helps. That's how I weed through pre made formulas for raw and gently cooked. And so let's get into some brands that I like. So Solutions Pet Products is probably my most favorite brand. And a lot of these you can buy online or in your local specialty pet food store. And if your local specialty pet food store is already carrying raw brands, chances are if they don't have Solutions or Green Juju or Small Batch or a brand that you like or are curious about, if they don't have it, you can let them know that you want it and they can order it for you, which is really convenient and likely better for the environment because they'll probably get it on a truck with a bunch of other stuff delivered at once versus, your individual shipment. So that's something to think about. If you can buy it local, I think that is best. So you cut down on our carbon footprint, less waste, less packaging material. So a lot of them you can buy locally, and if they don't have it, you can ask your pet store. If you have to buy it online, that's fine too. Most of the brands I'm going to recommend have a where to buy page on their website where you can find distributors who will ship them to you or find retailers like brick and mortar retailers. So Solutions Pet Products is probably my favorite choice. The ingredients, the sourcing, the quality is all wonderful. Their formulas are so well formulated. They have done an excellent job of formulating their foods in such a way that they're more calorically dense. So your dogs need less volume to achieve the same outcome. So it's very calorically dense. You feed less of it, which I think is so much easier on their digestive tract. They also have a lot of fermented ingredients in their food, which make them, it's like an added digestion step. So just making it easier for our dogs to digest, sensitive dogs, senior dogs. I really love their foods. I love the sourcing. The only downside right now is they offer only 3 proteins. So chicken, pork, and beef. And, a lot of dogs do have beef and chicken sensitivities. So that one can be kind of tough. But if you have a dog with a strong gut who doesn't have any sensitivities, that's my favorite, especially for large dogs. Because of what I was trying to articulate a few minutes ago about the calorically dense side of things, since you're feeding less of it, you're saving so much money. I think for, let's say, a 50-pound dog, it comes out to less than $300 a month to feed your dog a really high quality raw diet. So I love them. I talked about Green Juju. I really like them. The HPP thing is questionable, but you can do your own research on that. I think they're wonderful. What they do have is a lot of great toppers. They have a lot of great raw goat's milk and different vegetable blends. So I'll get into this later, but I lean on them really heavily when it comes to Pine's fiber sources. I buy my veggies from them. They have a greens mix or a couple of greens mixes. They have a golden blend with squashes and turmeric and all kinds of wonderful blends that they put together that you can buy in a fresh frozen form or you can buy in a freeze dried form, which is really convenient. And that's something else I should add. A lot of these brands will have frozen options and freeze dried options. So, freeze dried is going to be your most expensive, but it is really convenient because the raw food is still a raw food. It's freeze dried in nice little dry pellets. So, for those who are not comfortable handling raw meat or they just like the convenience of dumping those in a bowl, remember they still have to be hydrated, but the freeze dried option is incredible. It still retains like 99.9% of the nutrient quality. So, that's nothing to worry about. So there's freeze-dried options, but it's very expensive. It's ideal for someone who has the money to afford it and wants the convenience of still kind of feeding something that looks like kibble. Um, and it's for those that, have a small dog and they tolerate that better and they can afford that premium price on freeze-dried. Solutions is only frozen raw. There's no freeze dried option. So, Solutions Pet Products, Green Juju. I'll share one more. I like small batch. They're a great option, and they have raw frozen. They think they have freeze dried too. I'm not 100% on that, but they also have some gently cooked. So, those are just some examples of the brands that you will see on that guide that I've linked down in the show notes that I have poured my heart and soul into putting together to help dog parents make that first step towards feeding fresh. You want to skip that whole cooking ingredients for your dogs like I did for Skip and Ann. I would suggest buying some pre-made raw or pre-made gently cooked and slowly mixing in little portions of that into their food instead. And they're replacing 25% of their kibble with a pre-made formula or half, so on and so forth. So that's a good way to really dive in. And some people might feed that way forever. And here's an important topic I want to touch on while we're here. When you find a raw brand that you like, a pre-made raw dog food, a pre-made cooked food, if you find one that you like, that is amazing. Say, I feed Solutions Pet Products. I love it. They're so great. That's wonderful. But you have to rotate in other brands. This is very important. Find at least 2 to 3 others that you like also and feed that on a rotational basis. So make sure that not only are you feeding Solutions Pet Products, for example, you're feeding their beef. Make sure that you're rotating in chicken and pork if your dog can handle it. But make sure you're also rotating in Green Juju, for example, and some of their formulas. And then, next month you're going to be feeding some small batch. Our dogs need diversity in their diet for many reasons. A lot of it comes back to the AFCO minimum standards where these formulas aren't as complete as they say they are. So, to help make up for any nutrient deficiencies or excesses, it's best to not stick to the same thing all the time for too long because too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, and too much of a good thing may lead to not enough of something. So, rotating different brands just kind of make sure your dog is getting a wide variety of nutrients and covering all of the bases. And the other part of it is our dogs could get bored. They like to see different stuff. And our dogs are designed to thrive on a diverse whole prey diet. So they need diversity. They need things that to be changing. We need our dogs' guts to be so resilient and strong that if they get into something that their guts can handle it because they're so used to seeing different things that getting into the garbage or counter surfing and grabbing some of your dinner is not going to end up in a crisis, a bout of diarrhea and vomiting, or even worse, a trip to the emergency room. We want our dogs' guts, or they want their microbiome diverse. We want to feed them a whole variety of different foods. Hope that makes sense because I see a lot of that. I see people asking questions in my comment section about, what do you feed your dog? What do you feed Pine? And others will answer and they'll say, I feed this pre made brand. And I'm just like, okay, and what else? Like, you can't just find one brand that you like and stick to it. I know that's what we've always done when it comes to kibble. Because remember, I fed Royal Canin Golden Retriever adult formula for my last dog's whole lives. Never changed anything. So we have that ingrained in our head that we have to feed the same thing. And if we change it up, our dogs are going to get sick. But that's not the case. Maybe initially, maybe while you're trying to build up your dog's diversity, you might see a little GI upset. You might take some step forwards and some steps back. But you've got to get there. You've got to get through those to make your dog have some variety in their diet and have a stronger gut as a result. So, I was on the pre-made raw trend for the rest of Skip's life, which unfortunately was only about 6 more weeks, 5 or 6 more weeks. And then with Anne, I just continued doing what I just told you. I picked a few brands that I liked and I rotated through those. And for me, I would kind of make one order. I like to order bulk. A lot of these brands have bulk options. You save money and then also, again, less carbon footprint, getting more at a time. I would buy bulk. And if I bought bulk, I would try to at least buy 2 different proteins And once I got through that brand and the 2 proteins, I would order from another brand, a couple different proteins, and just keep rotating. And then during that time too, I was also adding in sardines, adding in raw eggs, adding some different healthy toppers for her to keep things diverse. And that's what I did for Anne. And while I was caring for her, shortly after Skip died, I was like, I need another dog just like him, another male golden, as soon as possible. So I did some research, and I'll talk about that topic on a separate podcast. But I did some research and found a breeder. And once I knew a puppy was coming for sure, I started doing a lot more research on raw feeding and learning how to do it myself. And that's where I discovered Dr. Ian Billinghurst's books. The best one that I've ever read that I recommend to everyone is called Give Your Dog a Bone. It's about, I don't know, at least 30 years old, but it is still so relevant and just gives you a lot of peace of mind when it comes to feeding our dogs. It just makes it so no BS, uncomplicated. It really isn't a complicated thing. So that'll give you a lot of confidence in feeding your dog. And of course, by the nature of the name, Give a Dog a Bone, it tells you that your dog, you're going to have to feed your dog some bones. So I learned a lot about that. And I knew, with Skip and Ann, I was comfortable with the pre-made stuff. And even when I was making it myself, I was comfortable with everything ground up together. I got the meat grinder. I put the necks and the wings and everything through the meat grinder. I was not ready to feed my dog bones because we all grow up to believe that bones are dangerous for dogs, and cooked bones are dangerous, but raw, meaty bones are very safe and essential to a canine's diet, a species appropriate diet. So I knew when I got Pine that I was going to be feeding him raw, meaty bones and feeding him a 100% DIY, like I'm making the raw meal myself. I was going to get there eventually. So did that research, read that book, started following some great accounts, some great natural rearing breeders who were showing content of puppies eating raw bones, like Puppies True North and High Desert Goldens. I loved seeing their content. It gave me a lot of confidence seeing puppies chewing on chicken heads and rabbit heads and wings. And I'm like, okay, puppies can do this. And reading Give a Dog a Bone by Dr. Billinghurst gave me that confidence too. He's like, any dog of any size with healthy teeth can have raw meaty bones. And I've since learned from people on Instagram, those of you dog parents who have reached out telling me about your almost toothless dogs still handling raw meaty bones. I mean, it's amazing. Dogs know what to do with them. It's great for their oral health, great for their mental stimulation. It just satisfies so many species appropriate needs. So I knew I was going to do that. And for Pine, I started him out. I grabbed some, let's see, chicken necks, and I think I grabbed some wings and some chicken feet. And I always had those on hand, but I was still, since he was a pup and because I was still new, I was feeding him green juju, solutions, small batch. I was mixing up different, raw brands or pre-made raw brands in the beginning because I didn't want to mess anything up. He was a pup. I still was kind of green. And I was incorporating in those raw meaty bones on a regular basis to strengthen his jaw and keep his teeth nice and strong. And he loved it. I had so much confidence from what I read, and all of it was so common sense based that I was like, he can handle this. It's instinctual. The sooner I start, the better he's going to be at it. And the stronger his jaws are, the better he's going to develop. So I started him on chicken feet, started him on chicken necks, handled it like a champ, no problem. And each step of the way, each time I did that and fed raw bones, I was getting more and more confident. And I imagine that's the same for anyone else who has done it. You kind of start a little fearful. So fast forward to now, and let's see. When did I take this? So I got certified in holistic pet health coaching, and I've wanted to get certified in canine nutrition as well. Haven't done it yet, but I have learned a lot through reading and podcasts. And I did take Feed Real Institute's 2-hour workshop, which is only $69, guys. I will link that in the podcast notes. I talk about them a whole lot on my page. I love supporting them because I'm so impressed by what they're doing. They have a really wonderful program that teaches dog parents how to feed their dogs a species appropriate diet and make it balanced over time because, do we even know how to balance our own meals in front of us? Absolutely not. We are not balancing our meals. The idea that we have to do it for dogs is crazy. We are achieving some sort of balance over time. So that is what the Feed Real Institute has mastered, and they have a wonderful curriculum for dog parents, for those who want to be certified in canine nutrition. And they also have a low commitment 2-hour online workshop that's only $69 that helps dog parents get confidence preparing raw meals or gently cooked meals that, they can cater to your needs at home. And I took that 2-hour workshop because I eventually want to take I want to get certified and using their program eventually. I just don't have time because I'm doing this, whatever. We won't get into that. But I eventually want to take or participate in that program. But I took that workshop, and oh my gosh, I don't quite know how it's 2 hours long and how they pack so much into it, but they go over so many topics, not just food. And you're learning, so they have a calculator called the Feed Real calculator. Makes it so simple. I will drop that in the link in the show notes below. You first fill out some information about your dog so they get an idea of how much your dog should be eating. That's another thing on feeding guidelines, whether it's on the website, whether it's the Feed Real calculator, whether it's on your pre-made food, your kibble. Feeding guidelines are just guidelines. You start there, but then you watch the dog in front of you. You watch their weight. If you're seeing a little too much rib, you need to bump the food up a little bit. If your dog is getting a little overweight, seeing a little extra fluff, you need to bump it back down a little bit. And gradually, just small increments daily, nothing drastic, but those guidelines are just that. They are just guidelines. You don't have to stick to those. So, Feed Real helps you walk through how much you need to feed your dog daily. And then you input what raw meaty bone your meal will be centered around, whether it be wings or necks or heads or duck backs, chicken backs. You plug in what raw meaty bone will be your meal will be based around, and then it tells you how much you need of every other ingredient. And I follow the ancestral model for pine, so I'll plug in duck wings, and then it'll tell me how much daily I need of fish, small oily fish like sardines, anchovies, mackerel, herring, how much organ meat I need, liver, kidney, spleen, and then how much fiber I need, whether that be fur or from veggies or fruits. So it's amazing. So you start with that calculator, and in the workshop, you have to show a finished meal that you've created. But before the workshop, you fill out that calculator, you figure out what you need, and it's amazing because it also generates a shopping list for you. I think it'll give you a week's worth, a month's worth, but it'll generate a shopping list. So it tells you how much of everything you need to make the food. Then the workshop kind of walks you through the hows and whys and about raw feeding or fresh food feeding. And then meanwhile, you're preparing this food and you're asking questions about sourcing and how to prepare the food, what to do if you're not comfortable with feeding raw meaty bones. It's wonderful. So I recommend it to everyone. I don't want to go into detail and give it all away, but that I took that and that gave me a lot of confidence. That course really helped solidify and give me confidence in feeding, especially the raw bone side of things. So I began following that and just preparing raw meals for Pine at home using the Feed Real calculator and using their shopping list and just I usually make about a week's worth at a time. So that's where I'm at right now. I have Solutions Pet Products in the freezer just in case I feel a little lazy and don't want to just make a whole bunch of fresh food. And then the rest, I just keep ingredients on hand. I order a lot from Raw Feeding Miami, from My Pet Carnivore, from Raw Delivery Minnesota. I source as much as I possibly can locally from our local farm store, a local regenerative farm. There's a lot of ways to be savvy about it and save money. You'll see that pre-made is really expensive. And if that works for you, if your time is better spent working than preparing raw meals for your dog and cost benefit analysis works out to where you need to feed pre-made, that's wonderful. But for me, it's so expensive. And not only that, but I love to have control over what's in my dog's food. I want to have control over the sourcing. I want to know exactly what's in it. And also, when you learn how to do it yourself, you can be so much more flexible and you can adapt the meals to what your dog's going through, what they need. For instance, I've been getting a lot of questions and going through this myself where it's wintertime. And if you have an active dog in the winter, they're going to be burning through calories faster. So they usually need a little bit of a bump up, or they need a little bit more fat added, or they need more proteins that are naturally richer in fats like lamb, goat, beef. So when you're doing it yourself, you can adapt as you need and change ingredients, source ingredients, depending on whatever your dog is going through, depending on the season. So I really like having control. And then there's another problem that I've run into a lot one-on-one working with clients is thyroid issues when feeding pre-made. And that's another reason we talk about rotation because necks, chicken necks, turkey necks, duck necks, they still have, there's still hormones in the thyroid tissue in those necks, and they can, when fed in excess, contribute to a little bit of thyroid imbalance, a little bit of dysregulation. So when you don't know exactly how much neck is being used in a pre-made formula, if they're using a lot and you're feeding just that food, just that formula, that can cause thyroid issues. Now, they can be reversed if you correct it in time, but these are things you just don't know. And this is why rotating is important at a minimum between different brands and different proteins, different formulas. But even more so, if you can get to a place where you can prepare the food yourself, source it yourself, get really savvy about it, try to source locally, try to get a hold of scraps and edible pieces by human standards, save a lot of money getting bulk amounts of really good local food. I mean, if you're preparing yourself, you have the ability to save a lot of money and have control over what you're feeding your dog is what I'm trying to say. So, just to kind of recap, with Skip and Ann, I started with kibble only, switched to half kibble, half cooked food, tried raw feeding or tried DIY raw myself, but in a terrible way, a terrible approach I was trying to follow. Got turned off by that. Did pre-made, and I quickly learned that when I'm getting pre-made raw, I need to be very mindful of the ingredients and the processing. So I learned to avoid foods that have a giant synthetic vitamin and mineral pack. And I needed to focus on pre-made foods where you look at the ingredients and it's only whole food ingredients. Those are going to be the most bioavailable for our dogs and least burdening to our dog systems. And then if we can, we want to try to, or if we're comfortable with it also, we want to try to avoid foods that use high pressure pasteurization. At least that's where I am because I'm, again, not sure where I stand on that. I've listened to a lot of conversations between experts about why it's bad, why it's good, and I still don't know, so I just try to avoid it. Now, I don't think there's any problem with rotating it in on an occasional basis or using it if your dog is sensitive for a little while, but that's just where I stand. Again, do your own research on HPP and make your own decision there. So after the pre-made, learning that it's kind of expensive and you don't have control over what's in the food, you can't really be really flexible. That's when I took Feed Real Institute's Feed Real workshop and learned a lot and gained a lot of confidence about feeding a raw diet myself or creating a raw diet at home myself. And that has really opened up a whole new world for me. So Pine, I started out, they have a great tip about if you're not comfortable feeding full raw meaty bones. So Pine was eating necks as a puppy, chicken feet, necks. I think that's kind of all I was comfortable feeding him in the beginning. And when it came time to feed wings and thighs, I was a little nervous, and whole chicken backs or duck backs. I wasn't quite ready for that step. And being a puppy, he was eating really, really fast. So I was so scared he was going to gulp it down and choke. So they had a great tip about buying poultry shears. Poultry shears are going to be a staple in your house if you start preparing raw on your own. The poultry shears allow you to take a duck wing or chicken wing, for example, and then cut it into 1-inch pieces so that it eliminates the choking hazard. The meat around the bone cushions everything, and it just gives you some time to get confident with it. Your dog's still getting the benefits of everything within the bone itself, but you're avoiding that fear that you have. Your dog can handle it. You're avoiding your fear for a little bit until you get comfortable. So I did that for a little while, but finally one day I'm like, I'm just going to let him do it. And I started by holding the chicken wing and letting him chew on it first and making him really chew and get that benefit of chewing and also avoiding choking on it. And once I could see that he could handle it, I started giving him whole chicken wings, duck wings, whole turkey necks, and chicken backs, duck backs, rabbit heads, all the things. He can handle it just fine. It's just been so fun to feed him different things and gain the confidence to feed him that stuff because chopping it up in those small pieces, it's doable, it makes you feel more comfortable, but you'll find that it's gonna save you a lot more time when you can just throw a chicken wing in the bowl with the other ingredients and be done with it, or in a container. So yeah, it's not that hard. I'm hoping that this conversation gave you some insight into what your journey can look like and how it can be messy. It doesn't really have to be linear. You can take steps forward, take steps back. You can pause. And I hope it gave you some great resources too for getting started in feeding a good quality pre-made diet, and then also some good resources for trying to just invest a little bit of time and money in learning how to feed raw yourself. So, hope that was all helpful, guys. So, I will try to remember to link all of those lovely resources down in the show notes. Thanks for bearing with me on this long one. And as always, love your dogs.